August 18th, 1590. It is Virginia Dare's third birthday. Her grandfather, John White, steps onto Roanoke Island expecting to find her, his daughter, and more than 100 English settlers. Instead, he finds silence. No one comes to the shore. No voices answer from the trees. The settlement he left nearly 3 years earlier is empty. The houses have not simply collapsed. They appear to have been taken apart. A wooden defensive wall now surrounds part of the site. Then White sees 3 letters carved into a tree: C-R-O. Nearby, cut into a wooden post, is the complete word: CROATOAN. The agreed sign of distress, a cross, was not present. There are no clear signs of a battle, and no evidence that everyone fled in sudden panic. The strangest part is that White probably understood the message. CROATOAN was not a secret code. It was a destination. But before White could follow the clue, events at sea forced him away. He would never see his family again. So did one word reveal what happened to the Lost Colony? Or did it explain only the first part of a much larger story? 3 years earlier, in 1587, a group of English men, women, and children crossed the Atlantic, hoping to establish a permanent settlement. Their intended destination was near Chesapeake Bay, farther north. Roanoke Island was supposed to be a temporary stop, but the voyage's pilot, Simon Fernandez, refused to take them farther along the coast. Summer was ending, and the settlers were put ashore on Roanoke. They had not arrived in an empty wilderness. Indigenous communities had lived throughout the region for generations. English expeditions had also visited Roanoke before, and an earlier military colony had already damaged local relationships. The new settlers repaired abandoned structures and tried to begin again. Almost immediately, their position became dangerous. A settler named George Howe was killed shortly after their arrival. In response, English men attacked a nearby village they mistakenly believed was responsible. That mistake deepened distrust at the exact moment the settlers needed local knowledge, trade, and cooperation. Food was another problem. The group had arrived late in the growing season. Their supplies were limited, winter was approaching, and a major drought had begun in the region. Within weeks, the settlers were already considering leaving Roanoke. And that detail changes the mystery. Among the colonists was John White's pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare. Soon after arriving, she gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child recorded as born in the colony. White now had both a daughter and a newborn granddaughter on the island. Yet the settlers asked him to return to England for supplies and assistance. He expected to come back quickly. Before he left, White and the colonists agreed on a simple plan. If they moved, they would carve the name of their destination into a tree or post. If they left under extreme distress, they would add a separate warning mark. They had also discussed dividing the colony. One group might remain near Roanoke. Another might travel inland in search of food, safer ground, and a better location for a permanent settlement. In other words, the colonists had planned for the possibility that White would return and find Roanoke empty. White sailed for England in late August, 1587. But a mission expected to take months became a delay of almost 3 years. England was preparing for war with Spain. Ships were held for national defense, and White could not organize a proper return voyage. After the Spanish Armada was defeated, other problems continued. Financial support weakened, and White struggled to find anyone willing to take him back across the Atlantic. All the while, the settlers had no reliable way to contact him. White did not know whether their food had lasted, He did not know whether they had moved. He did not know whether his granddaughter was still alive. Finally, in 1590, he secured passage with privateers willing to stop at Roanoke. On August 18th, White went ashore. The scene did not look like the aftermath of one sudden catastrophe. The buildings had been dismantled rather than violently destroyed. A defensive palisade had been added. White found no obvious battlefield and no signs that the settlers had departed in haste. Then he found the carvings. CRO and CROATOAN. The word matched the plan the colonists had made before White left. The separate distress mark was absent. To White, the meaning seemed clear. The settlers had gone to CROATOAN. CROATOAN was the name of both an indigenous community and an island south of Roanoke, generally associated with present-day Hatteras Island. A CROATOAN man named Mateo had worked with the English and had close connections to their expeditions. The message may therefore have meant exactly what it appeared to say. We left Roanoke. Find us at CROATOAN. White tried to sail there. He never arrived. Severe weather and trouble with the ship's anchors forced the expedition away. White returned to England without reaching the place named in the carving. The most direct clue was never followed. That is why the CROATOAN theory remains so powerful. English objects from the colonial period have been discovered on Hatteras Island. Their presence is consistent with contact between English settlers and the CROATOAN community. But consistent is not the same as proven. English sailors and explorers had visited and traded in the area before the colony disappeared. Objects could have reached the island through trade. Archaeologists have not definitively identified homes, graves, or human remains belonging to the missing colonists there. The word points south. The physical evidence does not prove that every settler went there. If you enjoy evidence-based historical mysteries, subscribe. Now, the second clue sends this investigation in a completely different direction. Before White departed, some colonists had planned to move inland. Centuries later, researchers examining a map associated with White found a fort-like symbol hidden beneath a patch. It appeared roughly 50 miles inland, near the western end of Albemarle Sound. Archaeologists later investigated an area in present-day Bertie County, sometimes called Site X. They found English objects dating to the relevant period. That sounds like an answer. But once again, the evidence stops just before certainty. No complete English village has been identified at the site. No graves, buildings, or human remains have been definitively connected to the lost colony. The objects may have belonged to a small number of settlers. They may also have reached the area through trade or earlier English activity. The hidden map symbol could represent a planned outpost rather than a settlement that was ever completed. So now the evidence points in two directions: south toward CROATOAN and west into the mainland. That may not be a contradiction. It may be the key. The colonists had already considered separating. If they followed that plan, CROATOAN may have identified the destination of only one group. Others may have moved inland. The lost colony may not have had one final location, because its people may not have shared one final fate. Other explanations remain possible. A hurricane could have forced the settlers to leave, but White found dismantled buildings rather than the destruction expected from a major storm. Drought, hunger, and disease may have killed some people. Yet White found no group of graves at the abandoned settlement. Conflict with local communities or Spanish forces could also have created danger. But no evidence proves that either group destroyed the entire colony at Roanoke. These threats were real. They may explain why the settlers moved. They do not provide one complete ending. The surviving evidence may fit a different picture. A struggling community dividing and relocating, rather than more than 100 people disappearing in a single mysterious moment. Some colonists may have traveled to CROATOAN and lived near, or joined, the indigenous community there. Others may have moved inland as planned. Some may have died from hunger, illness, storms, or conflict during the years that followed. Small groups could have separated again, leaving traces too scattered for archaeology to connect. That explanation is less dramatic than a sudden disappearance, but it fits the clues. The buildings were dismantled, a destination was carved, no distress mark was left, and evidence from the correct period has appeared in more than one possible location. So what did the single word really tell us? CROATOAN was probably not a final message from people who expected never to be found. It was more likely a direction left for John White by colonists who believed he would return. The tragedy is that he did return. He found their message, and then he was prevented from following it. The carving may tell us where at least some colonists intended to go. What it cannot tell us is who arrived safely, who moved elsewhere, or how long anyone survived. The American colony vanished from Roanoke, but its people may not have vanished at all. One word may contain part of the answer, just not the fate of everyone who left it behind. Do you think most of the colonists went to CROATOAN, moved inland, or divided into several groups? Share the explanation that seems strongest to you. Then choose the next historical mystery on screen and subscribe for the next investigation.